So the last harvest session, I was glad to hear that there's more people with ideas that they've written down that need to be included in the Philadelphia Declaration. If you have them written, we would love to have them here, but we would also like to hear them from you. But before we go there, we of course would like to hear from the different groups. And I was rude enough to walk out halfway from this group and enter another group. And I would like to actually, every time we do this, spend some time with every group. But that's of course impossible because the conversations can be so different and so interesting. So let's see if we can get some of the essence of what was going on in the different study circles from our scribes or representatives. Who wants to kick it off? All right. Yeah, well, David was first. Sorry.
Figured I better get it over with. There's so many ideas that. So I hope my group will help me pipe in if you miss some things. Okay. Get my glass here. Yeah. Okay. On the first question, on how we can express Theosophy better in modern language, we covered a number of things. One sort of obvious one is, but definitely always helpful, is to put things in everyday language as much as we can. And there is enough language we figured out there to do that. People know the word soul, they know the word spirit, evolution. So we can start with terms people know and then shine the theosophical light upon, theosophical view of evolution, that we don't have souls, we are souls. And we can go from there. Another area in this first one was the means of communication. We know, like, we're streaming this event here, but is there more we can do with the technology? Are we using it, as fully as we can in ways that will reach people? And a big question that came up that we actually talked about for quite a while was, how do we reach young people? I mean, really reach them. I know it. From my experience in ULT, many years ago, they had Theosophy School. They had something called Pathfinders, where kids went out in nature and saw Theosophy reflected in nature. But those families have all grown up and gone away, and there aren't new ones replacing them. So how do we reach the public? There must be families out there and young people that are looking for answers and teachings. What can we do to draw them to us? What are we not doing that might work better? So those are some of the ideas we covered on that question. Healing, of course, we talked a lot about that yesterday. One of our group gave a very nice analogy today. He said, when you see a tree and you see leaves on it that are turning yellow and are dying, do you go and try to heal each leaf? It's not going to work. Theosophy offers something where we can get to a deeper healing, so we should remember that Theosophy really offers healing because it gets to the source of the problem. If the gardener waters the plant and gets to those roots, the whole tree will, of course, benefit from this. So we should remember that we have something healing to offer. And so that's that one. Let's see, one more maybe. What would be the effective strength? Oh, what would be the effect if we strengthen the nucleus? Well, I think we all agreed that widening our circle obviously will have a positive effect. And the more that nucleus can be plugged into the universal wisdom, the more effective we'll be. So that puts, I guess, the onus on us. We can always grow and learn more in our own path individually within the group. Did you have anything, Garrett, that I might add?
Could you pass the mic, please?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we were thinking in Blavatsky's day how magazines had suddenly become international because you could at least have a steamship that was fairly reliable across the oceans. Well, nowadays, communication is really on the internet, and we're so happy to see that there's about a dozen different significant internet websites of theosophical groups. So we think this is a great way to still influence the overall culture and to attract new people who might be students of Theosophy. So that was kind of in the order of how do we make it modern language? Well, we put it in the form of modern media. And the other part I think we talked about was the current culture gives the most respect to science for many reasons. So that's a good place to start for people who are a little suspicious of philosophy and religious traditions. So a scientific aspect of the teachings is attractive to the general public.
Oh yeah, that reminded me, I'll just make one more point.
All right.
And I'm sure everybody does this anyway, to some degree, but one thing that Theosophy offers us is a key to understanding others, because it shows that Theosophy originally was, is in the root. It's at the root of all religions, sciences, and philosophies. So again, the onus is on us to some degree to familiarize ourselves when we're going to reach others to understand where they are. If we can use their language, you're talking to someone whose church just isn't doing it for them. If you know something about the Bible, about Christianity, you can go to examples that they understand. And of course in science, we're all racing to keep up with that. But the more we can do this, the more effective we can be as Theosophists.
Thank you very much.
Our group had a lively discussion, and we addressed the first two questions. The first question, we spoke a lot about finding a person's native interests and using words that make sense to them, and inviting them based on their interest to follow that line and form a connection with them. Art can also be used. We had an individual in the group, a very gifted artist, was gracious enough to share with us certain works that she had made that really expressed the theosophical teachings in a remarkable way that just speaks directly to the intuition. And then that flowed naturally into the discussion of the second question, how can these teachings contribute to the healing of the world? It was pointed out that if we really make a line of life's meditation in the form of every day, it's true that we're always thinking and always being, meditating in a certain way, but what if every day we made certain points where we took the time to discipline and calm the lower mind and invite the light of the higher to flow through, and made that a regular course of meditation, then that connection to the deeper soul will magnify our ability to spontaneously improvise the most natural flow when meeting a person who's perhaps new to the teachings. And that connection we make forges real bonds that are healing forces in the world. So the action is in a spiritual plane, really a spiritual mental plane, but formed on the basis of our own inner work every day. And so this example of the artwork that we saw, we thought was a perfect example of someone's line of life's meditation spontaneously efflorescence in a way that's understandable by people in an intuitive way, without words. So that was what we talked about.
Thank you.
So to the first question, this is the green gang. We didn't take the words language literally. Instead, the group talked with great strength about approaches to offering the teaching and building connections. And then the different approaches will draw out appropriate language. So it was said that we should try to apply the teachings by speaking to showing people how Theosophy helps solve problems, and including very personal problems. And in lectures, we should try to focus on what moves people at the moment, such as their challenge of caring for elders or coping with sickness and disability, that this will make them perk up and listen and then want to know more how Theosophical teachings might give them some guidance. The importance of giving examples was stressed, especially regarding karma and reincarnation. You have to help people escape from dogma and passivity. And we were helped in our group by someone from South America who could bring the discussion out into that part of the world that some of us don't know very much about. So, and we should bring good energy into the way that we present examples. We should try putting the right questions to people so that they're thinking about things. We particularly saw that if someone's been having a problem, and if you talk to them a bit, and try to draw it out, but you ask the questions about causation. Well, what do you think caused this? And what's the possible solution? And the point is to get them to recognize honestly that maybe they did something to cause a problem and that they have the responsibility to solve the problem. And this is a way of their beginning to think about karma, the teaching of karma, and that every human being has certain ideas about justice and responsibility. And so if you can evoke those deeply held ideas, then they'll look at their problem with a more honest and effective perspective. One should try to reduce the critical attitudes and stress the idea of discipline, just discipline in thinking as well as in action. We mentioned John's point in his lecture about picking up where people are coming from. If they already have a belief, like a Christian in some form of inspiration by divine power, then work with that. Don't just negate or ignore their already held beliefs. We had the example how in the Netherlands there was an effort to approach Muslims with their core ideas and set up a process. There was a kind of a forum that was held where Muslims are made to feel comfortable that they're not regarded as dedicated to a false religion, and that we want to foster mutual learning, and that will help people feel comfortable and want to hear more about theosophical ideas. No pushing. After you share an idea, let go. And let the idea just kind of settle into, and maybe it will be a few days, maybe it will be a few years before your listener begins to see and sense the core idea that you tried to share. Theosophical ideas should be expressed in moral language because, again, universally, human beings do have a moral sense. David Hume pointed that out. So if you don't try to just be metaphysical, but again, nurture the point in moral language, put yourself in the shoes of others. It doesn't matter which technical language you use. If you're kind of in there and building confidence and interest, then you'll figure out what language to use. Yes, and that we should try to convey the moral and ethical ideas in a fresh way. There are many possibilities. So in a sense, you have to free up your own mind and not get stuck in one way of expressing Theosophy or just parroting language from a book. To the second question, how can the teachings contribute to the healing of the world? We had a lot of bold ideas, probably not time to talk about them all. First of all, work on yourself, because if you're going to be an agent of healing, you need to have the potency of a healer. Ultimately, you want to draw down the influence of Buddhi and its corresponding support of Brotherhood, but that takes a little effort, patience with stress. We mentioned the problem of loneliness and isolation, especially among young people. And so to change our society, we must change our thoughts, imagine brotherhood, and work on bringing people, particularly young people, into some sort of community so that they can feel comfortable. It was mentioned that almost all the shooters and the awful acts of violence in this country have been committed by the lone wolf who is isolated and feeling alienated from any kind of human relationships. And that one way to bring young people into community is to give them some responsibility that gives them a connection. We're remembering the example of taking juveniles who get into trouble and putting them out in a farm where they have to care for animals. And that actually has a very therapeutic event, because they don't have hostility towards the animals the way they may at that time have hostility to other human beings. The work of meditation, letter 4 in William Quan Judge's letters that have helped me, was mentioned as a very comprehensive therapeutic approach to starting with yourself and then broadening your sense of obligation and recognizing you're not separate from anything, and that's actually required if you're going to develop a sense of brotherhood. And you must be honest, Judge says, about both the positive and the negative realities. You can't just kind of dream about what's nice. You have to recognize the negativities in yourself as well as in the community. The importance of feeling brotherhood was stressed. Karma in action was a term used to describe that. And you should look deeply into the 3 fundamental propositions and recognize that they are primary examples of how the teachings exist. You don't have to invent things. If you just go to those fundamental teachings and realize they're within yourself, thus you can experience unity, and that's going to strengthen your contribution to the world. And we also recognize that even though we see these awful things happening and feel helpless to help the people in Somalia or wherever, remember the Judge example, and HPB says this also, you, just even alone or in a group, by your thoughts, can offer therapeutic vibrations, you might say, all around the world. As we know, Mr. Judge used to give lectures in the beginning to empty halls, but that didn't discourage him from recognizing that it was a start. So we have the power within us to affect conditions everywhere, and so we should use that. To the third, we didn't have much time for discussing the third question, but the view seemed to be that that both are needed, both the strengthening of the nucleus and the attention to the broader world, and they feed each other, so to speak. We need to, the more we can just strengthen the quality of thought and action within the nucleus, that's good, but we also need to be keeping our eye on the broader reality. We were realizing that the world is different than in 1875. HBB had brought a storm of ideas, but maybe we're at a point where things are so bad that there's going to be another storm of ideas. And the progress was illustrated by the story of a boy on his bicycle that broke, and he said, "It's my karma."
That's a whole lot of ideas from one sturdy circle. What did you do with the clock in there? You did a trick with time, I'm pretty sure. So what is the next group? Yep.
Okay. We first had some reactions to the lectures, and we found that truth has to be in you before you can recognize it. And all of the truth is in everyone, but experience and thought brings it out. We came back to the question on how to prove or how to teach reincarnation. And well, the thing is then that everyone knows. And you have to help people to rise above the monastic part and look for deeper insight, go to a higher level and evoke the inner self. We also talked about how to reach younger people and how to involve them in the work. An important idea was to let younger people know that they are needed for the work, and maybe step aside yourself and give them the opportunity to become independent workers themselves. Because you can assume that that is what they want, that they want to commit, and give them the opportunity to work together and experience how it is. The first question on how to translate...
Sorry to interrupt you. Could you say a little bit more about that? They want to work and they have to experience how that is. How does that work? Sounds interesting.
How does it work? Well, if you are attracted to an idea and you see that it is working to spread it, then maybe you want to help yourself. Whatever capabilities you have, maybe you want to contribute to that. And if you are not given the opportunity, because it is done in the right way and there's no need for you, then maybe you go look somewhere else. I don't know.
So involve new people quickly in doing the work and not just study 20 years first. That's okay, interesting.
Yeah. The question on how to put Theosophy in modern language is, well, we arrived at the conclusion that when Theosophy is alive in you and is part of you, it becomes a way of your talking. And the way you see people, you see them not as just material beings. And then you can talk theosophically about any subject without talking about Theosophy itself. And then it is helpful in all parts of life. For instance, your work. Somebody works helping people through the process of dying, and then you can just let them know, make an analogy of sleeping and waking, and give logical reasons for having some quiet and peace in this process and letting go, that it is about, not about the body, but about the soul. And the questions, how do these teachings are healing to the world at large? Well, we feel more connected, more aware that we're going to be around for a very long time together. So we feel more responsibility. The idea of oneness has impact on our behavior towards each other, but also towards the environment, the entire universe maybe. We don't look at politics to solve all kinds of problems, but discuss it at the level of mentality. What kind of qualities prevail and what would be better? And it helps us to see the other as ourselves. And it points to selflessness. The I is going to the background. And we may arrive at the idea of unlimited devotedness to others. And it may invoke reverence for all of life. That were our main ideas, and I don't know if anyone wants to add something to this of our group.
Excellent, thank you.
Yes?
One of the interesting things that came up when we were talking about how do we get young people and the use of the internet, one student pointed out that a lot of young people like the idea that these ideas come to them through the internet. You know, they don't have to go to a location. It's not locational anymore. And we see this reflected in even our habits of consumption. We don't go to stores. So one of the challenges we have is how to move people from who are perhaps in a city who can join together and be part of a location, a community, you know, boots on the ground, not just studying at home.
You mean a virtual location?
Yeah, there's a virtual.
Like
you know,
a hub?
Yeah, there's very many people who can't form, you know, that are interested in theosophical ideas but are not near any theosophical society or group. And this is wonderful, you know, we're starting to reach them. But we also would like to be able to get some of the young people who are nearby to come to the actual physical location as well. So that's a challenge.
So the one can be a vehicle for the other, more or less. Mm-hmm. Good idea. And we're live streaming today again, so that's, we're working on it, but there's much more to do, to discover, to use. Yeah, good point. Mr. Jennings.
Yeah. No, I'm still in space because you know, the group did such a wonderful idea that I'm still trying. Wonderful idea. They, you know, just a job. I'm still trying to integrate the ideas, and I'm trying to do it in a way that just more represents the overall as opposed to the details, because I think some of the details are the same. And so, although this may be wrong, I'm going to start out with this metaphor from the cell again. That if we're thinking of the cell as the world, and we've got the nucleolus, we've got the nucleus, we've got the organelles, we've got the proteins, etc., the true message is the ancient wisdom religion. That's Theosophy. That is the absolute totality that dictates all of the information and regulates the life of the cell. So, if we keep that in its integrity, each one understanding that according to their own ability, we've got to stop being talking heads with ourselves and do something in the world. But if we're going to go out into the world, we've got to realize that there is a continuum of need. And that continuum, in some respects, is reflected in the principles of our nature and our developmental stages. But it can be reflected in the desires we have, the interests we have, the needs we have, the expectations we have, the problems we face, the understanding we have or we need to have, and the stages of life at which we are. So if we, as part of that nucleus with the wisdom, understand this, then it's not that we're going to ask them to come to us, but we're going to create the proteins, i.e. all of the messengers, that are going to go out into the world to work. But also we have to recognize what's already working in the world as instruments that are viable. And so we can also use those same instruments and techniques in terms of whatever is working, whether it's talking, whether it's music, whether it's communicating through knowledge, whether it's serving, and it's all a matter of serving. We have to apply in real time, in real language, in real action, the teachings. So it's not enough to know them, we have to be them. And we're being them through what we're doing by recognizing that the thousands of organelles in the cells, again, each have their needs, and those needs are different. And so we have to be flexible enough to understand what the needs are according to the environment that we're going in, the level of society, the needs of society, the needs of the nation, the needs of the world, to modify that protein message to fit that need. So they have to be receptors, we have to be the information that hooks up with that receptor. We also have to recognize that the teaching is the healing. And if we're applying it correctly by the proteins, metaphorically, that we make, all of that gets addressed. Some of the other particulars, though, that did come out were using myth. That is something that resonates with everyone as part of a vehicle of communication, of inspiration. Using stories, especially to children, that attract and capture the parents. And again, I must admit that this is an idea, it was brought up in the group. We had two, I think, marketers almost there. If we do if we do research on Interline, we see there are a lot of story books out there. But the power of the storybook is that if the parents are reading it to the children and the children are asking questions because the stories are interesting, the parents got to do more homework. And so they're learning, the children are learning, and you're capturing them at a very, very young age, which is most important. And the other idea that came up was that there are hot topics. You see that on TV all the time. And the hot topics are points of dialogue that everyone at every level of society finds an interest in. So we don't have to talk about one thing, but we have to address the hot topics that are in the minds and interests and needs of the people, and we can be flexible with that. So maybe we can have a, and this is a moment of creativity, hot topic TV show on not necessarily theosophy as a word, but theosophical teaching in action. Because in a sense, theosophy has always been, but it's not always been called theosophy. And so it's going to be important that once we heal, i.e. once we answer their questions and we waken up that curiosity, that we can direct them back to the nucleus, which is the teaching. So.
Anything that Jean missed? Good. All right. All right. So we have a lot of ideas. We see a lot of need and suffering in the world. And but for the acorn to become the oak, we have to do a lot of work. So the last question we have for this morning, which is already approaching lunchtime, is once again the same we had yesterday. What can ITC basically do to support, help, strengthen the mainstreams, other traditions, groups, individuals, to bring Theosophy to the world. So any last ideas, anything that maybe came up this morning, last night? Yes.
I'm going to share an idea from Jim Colbert that he shared this morning. The idea that having a list or a place to go where you can find out where are all the theosophical libraries in the world, in all the different languages too. For example, I just got a message this morning from Yulia Shabanova from Ukraine, who I introduced last night, the Ukrainian TS, and they've been having a wonderful meeting in Kiev in honor of H.P. Blavatsky's birthday with people from all over in the Russian-speaking world, and there is a remarkable library in Kiev of theosophical literature that's all in Russian. So, you know, what if the ITC had a listing of that place? And then Mr. Colbert was telling me about a place in Australia, the Campbell Research Library, and there's many others. You know, we all know, Wheaton, everywhere. So why not have that? That would be helpful.
So we can find them, yeah. Good point. All right, if you come up with something during lunch or you're not happy to speak here in front of the group, just write something down, leave it here on the table, and we'll work on it this afternoon.
One of my grandchildren, I talked about the idea of attracting younger people. He said, make whatever you do, put the word free on the communication. Young people do not have much money, and they're really looking for that word.
Thank you. Maybe then we go back to the online opportunities, because the internet is at least maybe not free, but it's not expensive. All right.
Okay.